The Warrens are renowned for their paranormal research and ghost hunting. During a presentation, they share footage from their various solved cases. The audience is given the opportunity to ask questions, and one man inquires about their preferred title. The husband identifies as a demonologist, paranormal researcher, and ghost hunter, while the wife simply introduces themselves as Ed and Lorraine. The scene then shifts to Harrisville, Rhode Island in 1971, where a family has just moved into a new home. The younger members of the family are filled with excitement, except for the eldest daughter. Roger and Carolyn attribute her behavior to being the first child. Interestingly, their dog refuses to enter the house, displaying the least enthusiasm for the new environment. As the family begins to unpack their belongings, Cindy takes a wind chime to the porch and calls for April to come back inside. April wants to show her sister a music box she found in the yard. Later that night, the girls engage in a game of hide and clap within the house. Two of them run off, leaving Christine blindfolded as she searches for them. They clap their hands to help her locate them, and Christine requests a second clap. However, Cindy cheats and doesn't clap, leading Christine to enter the closet where she finds Nancy, who accidentally breaks something. When Roger investigates the noise, he discovers a boarded-up cellar. After lighting a match, he descends the lengthy stairway. Upon reaching the cellar, he discovers a plethora of ancient items. When he returns, he warns the girls not to venture down there. The following morning, Carolyn awakens and traverses the house, greeting the children. Andrea informs her of a dreadful odor in her room. Carolyn descends the stairs and notices that the clock has halted at 3. In the cellar, Carolyn finds Roger setting up a light. She is clueless about what they will do with the items stored there. Roger believes there may be valuable antiques among them. While Roger remains downstairs to fix the furnace, Carolyn goes to prepare coffee. Another clock, also frozen at the same time, catches her eye. April searches outside for their dog, as instructed. Within moments, the parents hear April's piercing scream and rush to her aid. They discover their dog lifeless. Meanwhile, Ed guides a reporter into the room displaying their collection of items acquired from their cases. The reporter questions the safety of keeping everything intact rather than destroying it, but Ed explains that sometimes it is better to preserve these objects to contain what they might hold. The reporter expresses a desire to see the Annabelle doll, and Ed obliges by leading him to her. The reporter inquires about what prevents the entities attached to the objects from clinging onto them. Ed explains that they must take extensive precautions. Suddenly, a loud noise echoes through the room. Ed discovers that his daughter Judy has secretly entered. He scolds her, reminding her that she is forbidden from entering the room. Later, Lorraine and Ed are together with Judy when Ed enters with a cup of coffee. They send Judy downstairs for dinner and discuss the reporter. Lorraine notices that Ed is reflecting on a past incident and advises him not to blame himself anymore. Meanwhile, back at the farmhouse, the girls are asleep in their rooms when Christine feels a sensation of someone grabbing her foot. Roger wakes up at his desk. He hears a noise in the house and follows it to the kitchen. Upon finding an open window, it appears to be just a draft. He hears another sound on the second floor and discovers Andrea on the stairs, who informs him that Cindy is sleepwalking in her room. They witness the girl repeatedly hitting her head against the wardrobe. Rather than waking her, they gently guide her back to bed. The following day, Roger shares the incident with Carolyn, who expresses concern about how to address the sleepwalking situation. He notices that she has another bruise on her, but she has no clue where she got it. He advises her to consult a doctor. As Roger exits the house, he hears a bird crash into it and perish. Carolyn sends the girls off to school and checks on April, who is engaged in a conversation with someone who isn't physically present in her room. April claims that she's talking to Rory, her new friend, and hands Carolyn a music box she discovered. She explains that in order to see Rory, she must play the music box. According to April, when the music stops, Rory will appear behind her in the mirror. Carolyn becomes engrossed in the game and starts to believe she sees something in the mirror. When the music stops, April startles her. April pleads with her mom to play hide and clap together. Carolyn begins the countdown and then starts searching for April. She hears the first clap and follows the sound. As the clock chimes, she asks for the second clap and reaches Andreas' room. Carolyn calls out for April and the wardrobe door swings open. She requests the third clap and receives a response from the wardrobe. She goes toward it and can hear breathing, but suddenly hears the girl running outside of the room. April walks in and Carolyn is confused about what just happened. That night, Roger comes home and he just a call for a job. They go to bed. Christine is sleeping when something grabs her leg and drags her down the bed. She sees that her sister is sleeping in the other bed and then peeks under her own bed. The bedroom door creaks and the girl sees something next to it, so she wakes her sister and asks her if she sees the person behind the door, looking right at them. Nancy goes to check, but still sees nothing, while Christine tells her that it's standing right behind her. Suddenly, the door slams and Christine screams, prompting the parents to barge into the room. Fine, they ask what happened and she tells them, but they see no one. She says that it talked to her, saying it wants her family dead. Sometime later, Carolyn can be seen taking some supplements. She's covered in bruises. Then, she folds the laundry and hears clapping in the house, thinking it's the girls. She goes to check on them, but all of them are sleeping. When Carolyn checks on April, suddenly the sound of children's laughter fills the air and all the photos on the walls come crashing down. Downstairs, Carolyn hears the clock chime 3 times as she looks around. She hears clapping once again and decides to investigate. Suddenly, the piano in the basement starts playing on its own. Carolyn enters the basement and informs whoever is down there that she will lock the door. But as she turns around, the door slams shut in her face, causing her to tumble down the stairs. As Carolyn climbs back up the stairs, a ball falls from the adjacent wall, causing the light bulb to shatter. In the darkness, Carolyn strikes a match. Just then, someone asks her if she wants to play hide and claps right beside her. Meanwhile, Cindy is in Andrea's room, repeatedly banging her head against the wardrobe. Andrea manages to get Cindy onto the bed. Suddenly, the banging noise persists and Andrea approaches the wardrobe. As Andrea opens the door, Cindy wakes up. A creature suddenly appears on top of the wardrobe and jumps onto the girl.
Roger arrives home and hears screams coming from inside the house. He rescues Carolyn from the cellar and then rushes up to Andrea's room. There, he finds her screaming on the floor. The Warrens are giving another lecture on demonic possession and exorcism. Ed mentions that he is not authorized to perform exorcisms, but he has witnessed many. He proceeds to explain the stages of demonic activity, infestation, oppression, and possession.
Carolyn attends the lecture. Then she encounters the Warrens outside and requests their presence at her house to investigate, as she is concerned for her daughter's safety. Lorraine agrees to help. Later, the Warrens are spotted arriving at the farmhouse. Carolyn welcomes them by opening the door. Roger greets them, and they proceed to meet the children. Carolyn explains that they all sleep in the living room because the girls feel more secure, and she mentions that the house is always cold. She informs them about a foul smell resembling rotting meat that moves around the house. Ed suggests that such a smell could indicate demonic activity. He checks the locked door behind him, and Roger informs him that if they don't keep it locked, it will repeatedly bang in sets of 3s throughout the night until dawn. Ed speculates that this may be intended as an insult to the Holy Trinity. Carolyn also reveals that the clocks stop every night at 3 a.m. They have even stopped hanging photos because something keeps knocking them down. Carolyn mentions that the wardrobe was already in the house when they moved in, and the cellar contains many items left behind by previous occupants. Lorraine expresses a desire to see the cellar. Upon entering, she senses that something terrible occurred there. Later, Ed sits down to interview the couple. He inquires why they don't move out, and they explain that all their finances are tied up in the house, leaving them with no alternative. Ed records the interview as Carolyn begins explaining the events that have been occurring in the house. Lorraine discusses Rory with April. The girl mentions that he is always sad, possibly due to a traumatic experience. She hands Lorraine a box containing items related to Rory. As Lorraine looks at herself in the mirror, the music plays. Lorraine catches sight of the boy. They both walk towards the large tree by the lake, where Ed joins them. Lorraine turns around and sees someone hanging over Ed's head, causing her to almost faint. Roger and Carolyn admit that they are unaware of the previous occupants of the house. Ed and Lorraine inform them that their house requires an exorcism, but the entity has already attached itself to them. Lorraine has witnessed it and knows that it follows the family everywhere, feeding off their energy. She explains to Carolyn and Roger that there are numerous spirits present, but the entity is the most malevolent. Performing an exorcism is a complicated process that takes a long time and requires a lot of evidence which they will have to acquire. As the Warrens leave, they tell Roger and Carolyn to baptize their daughters for a little protection. Ed tells them that they'll have someone research the property to see what they're up against. Back home, Judy gives Lorraine a locket with her picture in it and tells her that she misses her and her dad. Later, Ed tells her that Carolyn's voice didn't record and plays the tape for her. Lorraine then tells him what she learned about the house and who built it in 1863. The man that built the house was married to a woman named Bathsheba, related to a woman hung for witchcraft. She sacrificed her child when it was 7 months old. Then she proclaimed her love for Satan, cursed anyone that took her land and hung herself on the tree. Her death was pronounced at 3 in the morning. Another woman that lived there had a child named Rory who disappeared in the woods after which she killed herself in the cellar. Lorraine found more people that have died or committed suicide on the property. Suddenly, the tape begins to play by itself. They hear a ghastly voice recorded on the tape at 3 in the morning. The Warrens arrive at the house with Drew and are joined there by Officer Brad. They set up ghost hunting equipment all over the house. Ed, Roger and Drew set up a camera with a thermostat switch at the 3 as well. Roger asks if they've ever caught anything on film and Ed says that they have. He tells Roger about the witch that killed herself right above where he's standing. Lorraine and Carolyn talk in the house. She tells her about what the witch had done and that killing their baby was the way that witches believed they would get closer to Satan. Drew shows Andrea how UV light works, then Ed comes in. A door creaks open and everyone is on standby when Brad comes out of the toilet. That night, Ed and Drew check the equipment. Then Ed puts crosses and holy water around the house to piss off the entities. Suddenly, the same door creaks open again. The camera snaps a photo. Ed gets the camera, then goes down to the cellar with Lorraine and Brad. They ask for the entity to communicate with them. Ed looks though and records the sounds of the cellar. Lorraine feels sick and says that there is definitely something there. They leave the basement and suddenly the door slams shut, scaring Brad. Drew makes fun of him about that later, but he says he believes the clock which doesn't. Stop at 3:07. The next day, everyone is having pancakes for breakfast and Roger promises to take the girls out for ice cream later. Carolyn will stay and rest. She tells Ed that they all feel much safer with him and his team around. Later, Lorraine and Ed enjoy the fresh air and talk about the family. Lorraine really wants to help them. Suddenly, a storm begins to brew and the wind moves one of the sheets Lorraine is folding, revealing an entity. She sees it in the house again, where Carolyn is sleeping. Another bruise appears on her arm and the malevolent entity shows up above her, vomiting in her mouth. Lorraine goes after Carolyn, but she doesn't open the bathroom door for her, then lies that nothing happened. Roger and the girls come back to the farmhouse and he sees Ed fixing his car. He thanks Ed, even though he was skeptical when they first came. Ed says that he didn't want them to come because every time Lorraine senses something it takes a toll on her. He tells him about the last case they worked when she saw something that really disturbed her. When they came home she locked herself in a room and didn't come out for 8 days. She never told him what she saw and he'll never ask. That night, everything is set up and they begin the wait. Brad goes to the kitchen to get more coffee. He thinks he sees something on the porch and goes outside after he hears, "Look what she made me do." When he comes back he sees one of the ghosts that killed themselves on the property. He follows it and it attacks him. He screams for Ed and everyone flocks to his position. As he tells the others what he saw, Cindy triggers a trap. Ed tells Roger not to touch her because she's not alone. Cindy walks inside Andreas' room and the door slams shut. Drew checks the audio and hears someone in there with her. Lorraine listens as well as someone is telling the girl to follow them. When the men open the door, they can't find her. Brad gets the UV light. Ed follows the girl's footsteps to the wardrobe and finds a trap door that leads inside the walls. They find Cindy there and take her out. April tells Lorraine that that's where Rory hides when he's afraid. Lorraine crawls inside the wall and finds Rory's toys. She places the music box in the place without dust. Lorraine finds a rope and pulls out a noose. Suddenly, she drops down through the walls in the cellar. Ed freaks out and runs out to find her. She hears someone's laugh, then activates the music box. The laugh turns into a cry and a woman saying that she made her kill him. The entity sees her and shows up in front of her, repeating the same words. She points her in another direction and as Lorraine turns, she sees the witch hanging herself in the house. The witch chases after Lorraine and grabs her necklace, when Ed hears her screams and opens the door to the cellar. Lorraine knows what the witch does to her victims. She possesses the mother to kill the child. She says that the witch is feeding off of Carolyn.
Suddenly, something grabs Nancy and flings her across the room. It keeps dragging her and no one can stop it, until Lorraine cuts off her hair. They all storm out of the house and Ed tells Roger that they've got it all on tape, which will be enough evidence for an exorcism. He'll be back to the house with a priest, but without Lorraine.
Simultaneously, she senses something that leads her to the lake, where she sees a vision of Judy in the water. Lorraine calls her mom to check on Judy. The girl is alright. She tells Ed about it and says that it's some kind of warning. The family goes to stay in a hotel in the meantime. Later, Ed and Lorraine show the footage to a priest. He tells them that it's complicated because the children aren't baptized and the family isn't part of the church. The priest looks over the pictures again and is convinced that the family needs help, so he says he'll push it though himself. Back at the Warrens' house, Judy is in her bed sleeping. Her locket begins to move together with Lorraine's locket at the farmhouse. Something wakes up the girl. She gets up and calls for her parents. Judy looks for them in the house and goes into the room with all the trinkets from their cases. Annabelle is out of her box. The girl runs back up the stairs and the lights go out, so she calls for her grandma.
Darkness approaches her and something bangs on the door of the room where she hides.
It stops suddenly, then the lights go out again. Annabelle and the witch are in the room. Judy cries for her grandma again and finally wakes her. The grandma can't open the door. Lorraine and Ed arrive at the right time, running into the house. Ed tries to knock down the door. The chair keeps swinging and almost hits Judy. She tells them that there was someone rocking in the chair with Annabelle. Ed checks the doll and tells them that she's still in the box. Meanwhile, Roger comes back to the motel and the girls tell him that their mom took Christine and April and simply left with the car. Christine asks her where they are going. Roger calls the Warrens and tells them what happened. Andrea has also told him that her mom smelled like rotten meat.
Lorraine says that Carolyn will go back to the house, so Ed tells Roger to meet him there. Drew drives Roger to the house. Ed doesn't want to let Lorraine go, but she convinces him that she must. Brad arrives at the farmhouse the same time as Roger. He shoots through the door with a shotgun. They find Carolyn in the cellar wanting to kill Christine. They manage to subdue her, but April disappears as they drag the mother away to take her to the priest for an exorcism. They start bringing Carolyn out and Lorraine tells them that the witch won't let her leave the house. If they take her out, she'll kill her. The witch drags Carolyn back to the cellar. Drew leaves Christine in the van and runs back to the house to find April. The rest are with Carolyn in the cellar. She bites off a chunk from Brad's face, then they grab and restrain her. Ed needs to do the exorcism because Carolyn is running out of time, but he wants Lorraine to leave. She doesn't listen to him and gets the Bible from their van. Drew can't find April anywhere. Lorraine gets back and Ed starts reading from the Bible, then sprays Carolyn with holy water. She screams, making the entire cellar shake. Birds begin to attack the van and the house. The exorcism continues regardless, as Drew looks for April. He hears something under the kitchen floor and begins to break it open. Meanwhile, Carolyn spits blood and Roger wants them to stop, but Lorraine tells him that they're now fighting for her soul. Ed commands the entity to reveal itself. It screams and the entire house shakes, then it suddenly stops. The chair begins to levitate and Ed continues to read. Then Ed commands the entity to put her down. It tries to drop a cupboard on him, but he dodges it and tells the others to hold her still. Roger tells the entity to let Carolyn go, but it turns to him saying that she's already gone and that they will all die. Simultaneously, Drew finds April under the house and tells everyone. Carolyn hears him and goes after the girl. They all chase after Carolyn, but she finds the kid first. Suddenly, Ed calls the witch by her name and gets her attention, then orders her back to hell. Meanwhile, Lorraine speaks to Carolyn directly telling her not to hurt her child. Carolyn vomits out the witch. They take her out in the sun and the family happily reunites. April approaches Lorraine and gives her the locket back. The Warrens come back to their home and Ed goes to the room to place the music box there. Lorraine tells him that the Vatican had approved the exorcism. They close the door and the music box starts playing, indicating it is waiting for their next victim. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and comment for more content.